What if I told you that somewhere in the world another person will suffer a stroke before you finish listening to the next minute of this video? Most people imagine a stroke as something that strikes without warning, a sudden collapse, an emergency ambulance ride, and a life changed forever. But what if that isn't the whole story? What if your brain has been trying to warn you for days, hours, or even weeks before the major event occurs? The frightening truth is that many strokes don't come out of nowhere. In countless cases, the body sends clear distress signals before disaster strikes. The problem is that most people don't recognize those signals. They dismiss them as fatigue, stress, aging, or simply a strange moment that quickly passes. And that's exactly why this information could be life-changing. A stroke remains one of the leading causes of death and long-term disability worldwide. Every year, millions of families watch loved ones lose their independence because of damage that might have been prevented if the warning signs had been recognized sooner. To understand those warning signs, we first need to understand what actually happens during a stroke. There are two major types of strokes. The first occurs when a blood vessel inside the brain ruptures and begins bleeding. This type is often severe because the escaped blood places pressure on delicate brain tissue. The second, and far more common, happens when a blood vessel becomes blocked. Instead of blood reaching brain cells, the flow suddenly stops. Without oxygen and nutrients, those cells begin dying within minutes. Think of your brain as the control center for everything you do. Every movement, memory, conversation, and decision depends on a constant supply of oxygen-rich blood. Although the brain represents only a small percentage of your body weight, it consumes an enormous amount of energy. It never truly rests. Even while you're sleeping, billions of brain cells remain active, coordinating breathing, heartbeat, hormone regulation, and countless other functions. When blood flow is interrupted, the brain immediately begins to struggle. That's why doctors often repeat a simple phrase: time is brain, every minute matters. But here's the part many people never hear. A blocked artery rarely develops overnight. In most cases, damage has been building silently for years. Blood vessel walls become irritated. Fatty deposits slowly accumulate. Small injuries inside the arteries trigger inflammation. The passageway narrows little by little until one day blood flow becomes critically restricted. Before a major blockage occurs, the brain may briefly lose blood supply for a short period of time. Doctors call this a transient ischemic attack, often shortened to TIA. Many people refer to it as a mini-stroke. The symptoms can appear suddenly and disappear just as quickly. Sometimes they last only a minute or two. Occasionally they may continue for several minutes before resolving completely. Because the symptoms vanish, people convince themselves that nothing serious happened. That mistake can be devastating. A TIA is often the brain's final warning before a major stroke occurs. Imagine a highway that suddenly becomes blocked by traffic. Cars stop moving for a few minutes, then the obstruction clears and traffic resumes. Everything appears normal again. But the temporary jam revealed a serious problem. The same thing happens inside blood vessels supplying the brain. The symptom disappears, but the danger remains. Research has shown that many major strokes occur within days of these warning episodes. In other words, the brain may be giving you one final opportunity to act. The question is simple: would you recognize the warning if it happened to you? Because the first sign is one that many people ignore completely, and it often begins with something happening to just one eye. We'll explore that critical warning sign next. Imagine walking into your kitchen one morning, reaching for a cup of coffee, when suddenly something strange happens. One eye goes dark. Not both eyes, just one. It may feel as though a curtain has been pulled down across your vision. Some people describe it as looking through thick fog. Others say it resembles a gray shadow covering part of their sight. Naturally, most people assume the problem is in the eye itself. Maybe they're tired, maybe they stood up too quickly, maybe it's just age. Then just as suddenly as it appeared, the vision returns to normal. Everything seems fine again, so they move on with their day. But what many people don't realize is that this temporary loss of vision can be one of the most important stroke warnings the body ever sends. To understand why, imagine the network of blood vessels supplying your brain as a tree. Large arteries branch into smaller arteries, which divide again into even smaller vessels. One of those branches supplies blood directly to the retina, the light-sensitive tissue inside your eye that allows you to see. If a tiny clot or fragment of plaque breaks loose from a larger artery in the neck, it can travel through the bloodstream and temporarily block that small vessel. The retina instantly loses part of its blood supply. Vision fades. The darkness appears. Then, if the blockage moves away or dissolves, blood flow returns, and sight comes back. The episode may last only seconds, maybe a minute, perhaps two, but the message behind it is enormous. The problem is not the eye. The problem is the blood vessel system feeding the brain. In medical practice, doctors take these episodes extremely seriously because they often indicate that unstable plaque is already present inside major arteries. Think about it this way. If a tiny clot can temporarily block the vessel supplying your eye, what happens if the next clot travels a slightly different path? Instead of affecting vision, it could lodge inside a brain artery responsible for speech, or movement, or memory, or consciousness itself. That's why specialists often consider temporary vision loss a vascular emergency until proven otherwise. Unfortunately, many people never seek help after the first episode. They explain it away. They wait. They hope it won't happen again. Then another episode occurs. And another. Eventually, one clot doesn't move away. One blockage doesn't clear. And the major stroke arrives. But temporary vision loss isn't the only warning sign. The second major red flag involves sensation. It often begins with a strange feeling that seems harmless at first. Perhaps your hand suddenly feels numb. Maybe half your face starts tingling. Sometimes an arm feels unusually heavy, as though it doesn't belong to you. The sensation can resemble pins and needles. It may feel like cotton is wrapped around the skin. Some people describe it as a strange electrical buzzing. The key detail is how suddenly it appears. There is no obvious reason. You weren't sleeping on your arm. You didn't injure yourself. You weren't holding an awkward position. The sensation simply arrives out of nowhere, then disappears. And once again, people talk themselves out of concern. But here's what may actually be happening. Your brain contains specialized regions that process sensation from different parts of the body. When blood flow briefly decreases to one of those regions, the brain struggles to interpret signals correctly. The result can be numbness, tingling, weakness, or a strange disconnected feeling. Because each side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body, these symptoms often affect only one side. That's a critical clue. When a stroke warning affects sensation, it frequently appears on either the left or right side, not both equally. And while the episode may last only a few minutes, the underlying cause remains. The artery is still damaged, the plaque is still present, the clotting risk still exists. Your brain has simply recovered, for now. The most dangerous mistake is assuming that because the symptom disappeared, the threat disappeared too. It didn't. In many cases, the clock has already started ticking, and the next warning sign may be even more alarming because it affects something most of us take completely for granted every single day: our ability to walk, balance, and stay in control of our movements. And when that warning appears, it can feel as if your body suddenly forgets how to move normally. Have you ever stood up, taken a few steps, and suddenly felt as if the ground shifted beneath you? Not because you slipped, not because you stood up too fast, not because you were sick, just a sudden, unexpected loss of balance that seemed to come from nowhere. For many people, this becomes one of the most overlooked warning signs before a serious stroke. The reason is simple. Most people immediately blame something else. Maybe they think they're tired. Maybe they blame aging. Maybe they assume it's an inner ear problem. But sometimes the real cause is much more serious. Deep inside the back portion of your brain sits a remarkable structure called the cerebellum. Although it's much smaller than the rest of the brain, it performs an incredibly important job. Every second of every day, the cerebellum coordinates movement. It helps you walk in a straight line. It keeps your balance while standing. It allows your muscles to work together smoothly and precisely. Without it, even simple movements become difficult. You would struggle to maintain stability. You would stagger. You would lose coordination. You would appear intoxicated despite having consumed no alcohol at all. When blood flow to this area suddenly drops, even briefly, the results can be dramatic. A person may suddenly veer to one side while walking. They might stumble on perfectly flat ground. They may reach for a wall or piece of furniture because the room feels like it's spinning. Some describe it as feeling disconnected from their own body. Others say it feels as though their legs no longer belong to them. The frightening part is that these symptoms often disappear. Within minutes, balance returns. Walking becomes normal again. The spinning sensation fades. And because everything seems fine afterward, many people never mention the episode to a doctor. But that temporary recovery can be misleading. The artery supplying blood to the cerebellum may still be severely narrowed. The clot may still be present. The underlying danger remains. The brain simply regained enough blood flow to function again. For the moment, this is why sudden balance problems deserve serious attention, especially when they appear without an obvious explanation. Normal dizziness usually has a trigger. Maybe you rolled over in bed too quickly. Maybe you have a known inner ear condition. Maybe you became dehydrated. There is usually a logical reason. But when severe dizziness, staggering, or coordination problems appear suddenly and without warning, the possibility of a transient ischemic attack must be considered. And then there is another warning sign that can be even more frightening, because instead of affecting balance, it affects communication itself. Imagine knowing exactly what you want to say, but being unable to say it. The words are in your mind, the thoughts are clear, yet somehow your mouth refuses to cooperate. Or imagine speaking fluently while the words coming out make no sense at all. Family members stare at you. They know something is wrong, but you don't fully understand what's happening. These episodes occur because certain regions of the brain are responsible for language. One area helps form words and control the muscles used in speech. Another helps interpret language and organize thoughts into meaningful sentences. When blood flow is interrupted, even briefly, these systems can malfunction. The results can be startling. Words become slurred. Sentences become fragmented. Speech slows dramatically. Sometimes people can't find even simple words. At other times they speak clearly, but the message becomes complete nonsense. This is very different from occasionally forgetting a name or losing track of a word while tired. Everyone experiences those normal memory lapses. What concerns neurologists is sudden dramatic speech difficulty that appears out of nowhere, especially when it resolves after a few minutes. Because temporary recovery does not mean the problem was harmless. In fact, speech disturbances are among the most classic warning signs of an impending stroke. Your brain is essentially testing the limits of its blood supply. It's showing you what happens when oxygen delivery starts to fail. And every time one of these episodes occurs, the risk of a larger event increases. Think of it like seeing smoke coming from inside your house. The smoke may disappear, but that doesn't mean the fire isn't there. It simply means the fire hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And there is one final warning sign that surprises even many health-conscious people because it doesn't seem connected to stroke at all. At first glance, it appears to involve only the skin and headaches. But beneath the surface, it may reveal something much deeper happening inside the blood vessels themselves. And understanding that connection could help explain why some people develop stroke risk without realizing it. The final warning sign doesn't look like the others. It doesn't involve sudden blindness, it doesn't affect your speech, it doesn't make you stumble or lose feeling in your arm. Instead, it often begins with changes that seem completely unrelated to stroke. Perhaps you've noticed patches of skin that have lost their normal color, areas that appear much lighter than the surrounding skin. Or maybe you've recently started experiencing headaches that feel different from anything you've had before. Stronger, more frequent, harder to explain. Most people would never connect these symptoms to the health of their blood vessels. Yet in some cases they may be linked by a common underlying process, chronic inflammation. To understand why, imagine the inside of every artery in your body lined with an incredibly thin protective layer. This layer is called the endothelium. Think of it as a smooth, polished surface that allows blood to flow effortlessly through your vessels. When the endothelium is healthy, blood moves freely. Clots are less likely to form. Plaque has a harder time sticking. The entire circulatory system functions efficiently. But when that protective lining becomes damaged, everything changes. The once smooth surface becomes rough. Inflammation develops. Tiny injuries begin to accumulate. And suddenly cholesterol, platelets, and other substances find places to attach themselves. Over time, those attachments grow. Small deposits become plaques. Plaques become blockages. Blockages become strokes. This process often develops silently over years. Many people never feel it happening. That is what makes it so dangerous. One of the biggest misconceptions about stroke risk is the belief that cholesterol alone determines who is safe and who isn't. In reality, the condition of the artery wall matters just as much. Maybe even more. You can think of it like a road. A clean, smooth highway allows traffic to move easily. But when the road surface becomes cracked and damaged, debris begins to collect. Traffic slows, problems multiply. The same principle applies inside your blood vessels. And among the most powerful sources of damage is something affecting millions of people every day: high blood sugar. Most people associate blood sugar problems with diabetes. But the process often starts years before diabetes is officially diagnosed. Even slightly elevated blood sugar can gradually injure the endothelial lining. The damage happens quietly, almost invisibly. Day after day, year after year. As blood sugar remains elevated, artery walls become less flexible. Inflammation increases. Plaque formation accelerates, and the foundation for future strokes becomes stronger. What's particularly concerning is that many people feel perfectly normal during this stage. No symptoms, no pain, no obvious warning. Yet inside the arteries, damage continues. Another major threat comes from smoking. Every cigarette introduces thousands of chemicals into the body. Many of these substances directly attack the inner lining of blood vessels. The effects are immediate. Inflammation rises. Blood becomes stickier. Platelets become more likely to clump together. Clots become easier to form. At the same time, oxygen delivery becomes less efficient. This combination creates the perfect environment for stroke development. Imagine pouring sand into the gears of a machine every day. Eventually, those gears stop working properly. Smoking has a similar effect on the cardiovascular system. The damage accumulates until one day the consequences become impossible to ignore. Then there is blood pressure, and this is where many people become confused. Most people know that chronically high blood pressure increases stroke risk. That's absolutely true. Over time, elevated pressure places tremendous stress on artery walls. It weakens them. It accelerates plaque formation. It contributes to both blocked arteries and bleeding inside the brain. But there is another side to the story that many people never hear. Sometimes a stroke doesn't happen when blood pressure is highest. Sometimes it occurs when blood pressure drops. Imagine an artery that is already severely narrowed by plaque. Blood is still squeezing through, but only barely. Now imagine blood pressure falls significantly. Suddenly, there may not be enough force to push blood through that narrowed passage. Flow decreases. The brain begins receiving less oxygen. A blockage that was previously manageable becomes critical. This helps explain why some people go to sleep feeling completely normal and wake up unable to move an arm or speak clearly. During sleep, blood pressure naturally decreases. For most people, that's healthy, but in someone with severely narrowed arteries, that normal nighttime drop can sometimes expose an existing problem. And the reality is that age often magnifies every one of these risks, because as the years pass, the pace of arterial damage accelerates. The same habits that cause little visible harm in your 30s can create major consequences in your 50s, 60s, and beyond, which is why understanding the true risk factors becomes so important. Because the next thing we're about to discuss is exactly why some people suffer a stroke despite believing they were perfectly healthy, and why the warning window before a major stroke may be far more valuable than most people realize. This is the part that many people never hear from their doctors. A major stroke doesn't always arrive without warning. In fact, after a transient ischemic attack, a temporary interruption of blood flow to the brain, there is often a critical window of time during which a devastating stroke may still be prevented. That window is roughly 72 hours, 3 days, 72 hours that can mean the difference between continuing your normal life and facing permanent disability. The problem is that most people waste that opportunity. Why? Because the warning sign disappeared. The numbness went away, the vision returned, the dizziness stopped. Speech became normal again. And once everything feels normal, the brain convinces us that the danger has passed. But that's not how stroke works. Think of a TIA as a crack appearing in the wall of a dam. The water may stop leaking temporarily. Everything may appear stable, but the underlying structural weakness remains. Ignoring it doesn't make it disappear. It simply allows the risk to grow. This is why neurologists often treat a transient ischemic attack as a medical emergency, not because damage has already occurred, but because the next event may be far worse. If you've experienced any of the warning signs we've discussed, even if they lasted only a minute, you should never simply wait and hope for the best. That doesn't mean panic, it means action. One important recommendation many stroke specialists make is avoiding complete isolation after a suspected warning episode. Imagine living alone and experiencing a major stroke. If speech suddenly disappears or one side of the body becomes paralyzed, calling for help may become impossible. That's why having someone aware of the situation can be incredibly important. A family member, a close friend, a neighbor, someone who can check in and respond if your condition changes. Many people underestimate how quickly a stroke can progress. Minutes matter. Sometimes seconds matter. Another critical consideration is transportation. Many people make a dangerous decision after a warning episode. They drive themselves. That can be a serious mistake. Imagine temporarily losing vision while driving. Imagine an arm suddenly becoming weak while traveling at highway speed. Not only does this place you at risk, but it also endangers everyone else on the road. This is one reason healthcare providers often advise against driving after a suspected TIA until proper evaluation occurs. Then there's blood pressure. Blood pressure is often one of the first things checked when stroke symptoms appear. Extremely elevated readings can signal a dangerous situation requiring immediate medical attention. But the most important point is this: never attempt to diagnose or treat yourself, especially when it comes to medications. One of the most common mistakes people make is taking blood-thinning medications on their own because they assume they're having a blocked vessel stroke. The problem is that not all strokes are caused by blockages. Some are caused by bleeding, and if bleeding is occurring, blood-thinning medications can dramatically worsen the situation. This is why brain imaging is so important. Doctors need to determine exactly what's happening before treatment decisions are made. A CT scan or other imaging study provides information that no symptom checklist can reliably provide. Even experienced physicians depend on imaging to guide treatment. That's why professional evaluation is essential. While waiting for medical care, simple measures can also help. Maintaining a comfortable resting position, avoiding cigarettes, avoiding alcohol, avoiding extreme heat exposure such as very hot showers or baths. Most importantly, staying calm while seeking prompt medical attention. Many people believe that if several days pass without another episode, they are safe. Unfortunately, that's not always true. A warning sign that occurred weeks ago or even months ago may still reveal important information about underlying vascular disease. The symptom may have disappeared, the cause may not have, which brings us to one of the most valuable questions a person can ask after experiencing a possible stroke warning. What tests can identify the hidden problem before a major stroke occurs? Because modern medicine has several powerful tools that can reveal dangerous conditions long before they become catastrophic, and understanding those tests may help uncover risks that would otherwise remain invisible until it's too late. By now, you've seen something most people never fully understand. A stroke is rarely a random event. More often, it's the final chapter of a story that has been unfolding quietly for years. The body gives clues. The brain sends warnings. The blood vessels reveal signs of damage long before a major blockage occurs. The challenge is recognizing those signals early enough to do something about them. That's where medical testing becomes incredibly important. If you've experienced any of the warning signs we've discussed, temporary vision loss, sudden numbness, unexplained balance problems, speech difficulties, or unusual neurological symptoms, there are several evaluations your doctor may consider. Each one examines a different piece of the puzzle. The first looks directly at the arteries supplying blood to the brain. These arteries travel through the neck and act as major highways delivering oxygen-rich blood upward. Over time, fatty plaque can build along their walls. At first, the narrowing may be mild, then moderate. Eventually, blood flow can become severely restricted. A specialized ultrasound can help identify these dangerous narrowings before they trigger a stroke. What makes this test valuable is that it doesn't simply show anatomy. It also reveals how blood is moving through the vessel. Doctors can identify turbulence, reduced flow, and areas where plaque may be creating significant risk. Sometimes the findings are reassuring. Other times they reveal a problem serious enough to require immediate intervention. The second evaluation focuses on something that often hides in plain sight: blood sugar. Many people assume they don't have a blood sugar problem because they feel normal. Unfortunately, elevated blood sugar can quietly damage blood vessels for years before symptoms appear. This is why doctors often use a test that measures average blood sugar levels over several months rather than relying on a single reading from one day. Think of it as a long-term report card. Instead of showing what happened this morning, it reveals what has been happening consistently. This test can uncover prediabetes and diabetes at stages when intervention may still prevent significant vascular damage. And when it comes to stroke prevention, identifying problems early is everything. The third evaluation looks not at the arteries but at the heart itself. Many strokes begin in an unexpected place: the heart. Certain rhythm disorders can cause blood to swirl abnormally inside the upper chambers of the heart. When blood stagnates, clots can form. Those clots may eventually break free, travel through the bloodstream, and become lodged inside a brain artery. The result can be a severe stroke that seems to appear without warning. What's particularly challenging is that these rhythm disturbances don't always happen continuously. A standard heart test lasting a few seconds may miss them completely. That's why extended heart monitoring is often used. By recording the heart's rhythm throughout an entire day, or sometimes even longer, doctors can detect hidden abnormalities that might otherwise remain invisible. And if a dangerous rhythm problem is discovered, treatment can dramatically reduce future stroke risk. This is one of the most important lessons in modern medicine. Many strokes are preventable. Not all, but many. The key is identifying risk before permanent damage occurs. And prevention doesn't rely on a single miracle solution. Instead, it comes from addressing the factors that slowly damage blood vessels over time. Keeping blood sugar under control, managing blood pressure carefully, avoiding tobacco, staying physically active, working with healthcare professionals to monitor risk factors before symptoms become emergencies. Small decisions repeated consistently often have a greater impact than dramatic changes made too late. Most importantly, never ignore temporary neurological symptoms. The fact that a symptom disappears does not make it harmless. In some cases, a symptom lasting only 60 seconds may be the most important warning your brain ever gives you. A brief episode today could prevent a devastating event tomorrow if you choose to act on it. So take a moment and think back. Have you ever experienced sudden vision changes? Unexplained numbness? A brief loss of balance? Speech problems that resolved on their own? If the answer is yes, write it down. Don't trust memory alone. Bring those details to your doctor. Because when it comes to stroke, early action can preserve something priceless: your independence, your abilities, and your future. If you found this video helpful, make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below telling us your age and where you're watching from, and share this video with someone you care about. One share could help another person recognize a warning sign before it's too late. Stay informed, stay proactive, and we'll see you in the next video.